Before the Shadow, before the Phantom, even before Batman, there was Zorro, the original masked vigilante. Created by John C. McCulley, an American pulp writer in 1919, the stories of Zorro are set in California during the Spanish colonial era. Zorro is a masked swordsman who defends the poor and oppressed against tyrannical officials and other villains. The Mask of Zorro, released in 1998, was an American swashbuckler film directed by Martin Campbell and starred Antonio Banderas, Anthony Hopkins, and Catherine Zeta-Jones. The film tells the tale of the legendary hero Zorro, who fights against injustice in the colonial era of California. The name Zorro is Spanish for fox, and the character is said to be inspired by the real-life historical figure Joaquin Murrieta, a legendary bandit who lived in mid-19th century California. However, the character of Zorro quickly took on a life of his own, becoming one of the most popular and enduring heroes in popular culture. The first Zorro story was published in 1919 in a pulp magazine called All Story Weekly. The story was called The Curse of Capistrano and featured a mix of adventure, romance, and mystery. In this story, Don Diego Vega is a wealthy young man who is secretly Zorro, and he sets out to avenge the murders of his father and his best friend. The popularity of the Zorro character quickly grew, and he soon became a staple of pulp fiction. In the 1920s and 1930s, several Zorro movies were made, starring actors like Douglas Fairbanks and Tyrone Power. These movies helped to cement Zorro's reputation as a hero who fought injustice and helped the downtrodden. Throughout the rest of the 20th century, Zorro continued to be an important character in popular culture. In the 1950s and 1960s, there was a Zorro television series, an animated show in the early 1980s, as well as another live-action version in the early 1990s. Today, the character of Zorro remains popular with audiences around the world. Zorro's popularity has inspired many other fictional characters, like the Lone Ranger, and especially Batman. The movie's plot follows Alejandro Murrieta, played by Antonio Banderas, a young outlaw who was trained by the original Zorro, Don Diego de la Vega, played by Anthony Hopkins, to become his successor. Together they take on Don Rafael Montero, played by Stuart Wilson, a corrupt governor who betrayed Don Diego in the past and is now back to exploit California's wealth and power, forcing the people to work as slaves at his mines. Along the way, Murrieta falls in love with Don Rafael's daughter, Elena, played by Catherine Zeta-Jones, adding a romantic element to the storyline. The making of The Mask of Zorro was a massive undertaking, with a large budget and an extensive production team. The process of creating the film began with the screenplay, which was written by Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio. The script was developed over several years, with input from various writers and producers. Originally developed by Steven Spielberg, the film went through several directors. First with Mikhail Salomon, who cast Sean Connery as the elder Zorro, de la Vega. Then when Salomon dropped out, Robert Rodriguez cast Antonio Banderas as the new Zorro, Murrieta. Then, when Rodriguez dropped out, Martin Campbell, who rebooted James Bond so successfully in 1995 with GoldenEye, and would do so again in 2006 with Casino Royale, joined the production. Connery dropped out, but Banderas stayed on. Others considered for the de la Vega role before Connery dropped out included Raul Julia, but Hopkins was keen to take the part as he really wanted to be in an action film. Actors considered for the role of Zorro included Benicio del Toro and Joaquin Almeida, who actually played the small part of General Santa Anna, which was eventually cut from the film. Catherine Zeta-Jones was relatively unknown at the time, but was cast as the feisty and cunning Elena, who becomes Zorro's ally and love interest. Before Zeta-Jones, Isabella Scorupco, who had starred in Martin Campbell's GoldenEye, was considered, as well as Salma Hayek. The role of the film's main villain, Don Rafael Montero, went to Stuart Wilson, who replaced Armand Desante due to scheduling conflicts. Wilson, who gives an incredible performance in this movie, had previously worked in Campbell on his film No Escape. The production of The Mask of Zorro took place in various locations throughout Mexico and California. Filmmakers sought to recreate the feeling of the Old West in the 1800s and sought out locations that would provide the most authentic and visually stunning backdrops for film. Both practical and digital special effects were utilized to create the film's action-packed fight sequences and explosive moments. The film's incredible sword fights were designed by the legendary Bob Anderson. Anderson was a swordsman who had choreographed sword fights and trained actors in swordsmanship for decades in films like Star Wars, Highlander, Three Musketeers, and the Lord of the Rings trilogy. The three main actors consisting of Banderas, Hopkins, and Zeta-Jones trained with Anderson for 2 months, specifically for their fight scenes in the film. Banderas went the extra mile, having studied with the Olympic fencing team in Spain for 4 months previously. Hopkins also practiced regularly on set with the character's bullwhip. The costume design for the Mask of Zorro was also crucial to the film's success. The mask, the black horse, and the iconic costume of Zorro are instantly recognizable to audiences worldwide. To create this iconic look, the costume designer Graciela Mazan drew inspiration from the colonial era of California, combining form and function into the visually breathtaking attire that the actors wore. The movie's action scenes are breathtaking, with intense swordplay and stunts that keep the audience on the edge of their seats. One of the film's most famous scenes is the sword fight between Zorro and Don Rafael Montero. The fight took weeks of preparation and rehearsals to achieve the amazing and visually stunning choreography. The team created a unique fighting style for each character, which reflected their personalities and fighting tactics. The dynamic between Banderas and Hopkins is one of the film's highlights, with Hopkins bringing gravitas and humour to his elder statesman role, and Banderas embodying the young and rebellious hero with his impressive athleticism and charisma. In a way, both Hopkins and Banderas played a title role, with Hopkins being, to use a Star Wars comparison, Obi-Wan Kenobi to Banderas Luke Skywalker. Catherine Zeta-Jones, in one of her breakout roles, is equally impressive and holds her own with the male leads in the action scenes. One of the best aspects of the film, for me, is the musical score by James Horner. Horner had just finished work on Titanic, and part of what drew him to the Mask of Zorro was that it was a complete change of pace from Titanic. Horner, despite being a highly acclaimed composer, had been criticised in the past for a lot of similarity in his scores, but Mask of Zorro gave him a chance to explore new territory. Since Zorro is the Spanish word for fox, Horner used a unique vocal fox-like howl in the soundtrack when Zorro appears at certain points. Also, during the first sword fight between Zorro and his nemesis, Captain Love, Horner uses flamenco steps in the soundtrack, which works brilliantly well and increases the suspense during the fight. The film has underlying themes of political and social justice, tackling issues of classicism, imperialism, and civil rights. But the theme of revenge is very strong throughout. Both the elder Zorro and the younger Zorro have deeply personal scores to settle with their enemies. If I have any criticisms, the film's pace does tend to drag in the middle section, as the two Zorros' investigation to uncover Don Rafael's scheme to retake California for the Dons and proclaim it as an independent republic does go on a bit too long. When the sword fights begin though, it's well worth the wait. The first appearance of the new Zorro at Montero's hacienda is absolutely brilliant, with some of the best swordplay ever seen, as Zorro takes on first Captain Love, then both he and Montero, which then escalates to him taking on Montero's army. Banderas insisted on doing all the stunt work himself. The only one he was not allowed to do was the jump in the horse chase scene, which was deemed too dangerous. Even so, the stuntman who did perform the stunt took a huge risk, and no digital effects were used here. It was a real stunt. Also, the sword fight between Zorro and Elena in the barn is played more like a seduction than anything else. Banderas and Zeta-Jones have incredible chemistry here. It's a shame though that it took 7 years before they managed to do a sequel, which wasn't nearly as good as this film, and pretty much killed the franchise. I would have liked to have seen several Zorro movies with Banderas. Overall though, The Mask of Zorro is a thrilling, action-packed adventure that evokes the same spirit of the classic swashbuckler films of old. Its star-studded cast, exciting action sequences, and its exploration of themes of justice and oppression make it a must-watch for fans of the genre. The movie has stood the test of time, becoming a beloved classic and reinvigorating the Zorro franchise for a new generation of fans. Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it and would like to see more, then please give it a like, consider subscribing if you haven't done so already, share it with your friends, and let me know in the comments, who would you cast as Zorro in a modern day reboot of the character? Most importantly, hope you all look after yourselves, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye for now.